Now, I'm going to start out by telling you something I'm sure you don't know. There are a lot of songs about love. No, don't have that. Really, lots and lots of songs about love. People who compile this type of important information estimate that nearly 70% of all songs have love as a theme. Now, one of these achieved masterpiece status thanks to the late legend Tina Turner, who, with scorching voice, and you just close your eyes, you can hear her, asked millions of listeners, what's love got to do with it? It's not hard to imagine how Jesus, in today's gospel reading, would have answered. Everything. Although he didn't necessarily mean the love Tina was singing about. That's because, while there are many Greek words for love in the New Testament, eros, a romantic love, isn't among them. If you want eros, look to the Hebrew Bible. There are enough instances there to keep you busy for a very, very long time. But in the New Testament, when you come across the Greek word for love, it's undoubtedly either agape, which is unselfish, giving divine love, or philia, which is love for fellow humans that encompasses care, respect, compassion. Today's gospel reading is chock full of examples of both. To cite just two, when Jesus says, as the Father loved me, so I have loved you, agape is used. When he says, no one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends, Philia is used. Now, since we've mentioned those quotes, it might be a good time to examine them more closely. Think of how the disciples felt. Just put yourself, if you can, in their place. When Jesus told them that he loved them like the Father had loved him. They must have been walking on air, if not on water, to be brought into this most intimate relationship. The only problem is, although a very sincere and devoted group, the disciples weren't too quick on the uptake. Had they given the matter a little thought, they may have come up with a list of just how the Father loved Jesus. That included, as the Reverend Dr. James C. Howell notes, tossing him out of heaven down to earth, where as a baby Herod tries to kill him, sending him into the wilderness, where for 40 days the devil besieged him, making him endure constant conflict with super pious zealots and violent bureaucrats who were forever plotting his end, bombarding him with all manner of perils, with legions of demons to be cast out, with incurables around every corner who need to be healed, and perhaps worst of all, for solace, providing him with a coterie of knuckle-headed companions who didn't really understand him and more often than not failed him. Then, to top it off, the Father visited upon him the most painful and degrading of deaths. That's what Jesus got for his intimacy with the Father, and that's what the disciples were about to get for their intimacy with Jesus. It reminds me of, you've all seen the Meta commercials on television, the ones that start by showing you a lush and lingering manner, how wonderful everything will be if only you take this pill or a swig of that liquid. Then those commercials end with a lengthy, rapid recitation of all the terrible results that could befall you from taking the same pill or swigging that same liquid. Thanks, but no thanks. And that's what Jesus' love for the disciples encompassed. In the words of yet another love song, I beg your pardon, but I never promised you a rose garden. That should have been about the time that the disciples said, thanks, but no thanks. Why don't we just exchange birthday cards instead? But they didn't. Jesus wasn't fooling around, and John's a pretty straight shooter. He gave it to them straight. The path was tough, almost impossible to tread. And then, at the end of their journey, torture and death would be there to greet them. Why should they accept? Because now they understood who Jesus was and why he was. They understood all of this because of love. And it was that love that would sustain them in their mission. They would lay down their lives so others might live eternally. That's what Jesus signed them up for, and to their credit, no one asked him if his pencil had an eraser. Now to this second example, the one about laying down one's life for another. That's a tough one. There's a paradoxical aspect to the New Testament in general and to Jesus' injunction in particular. What seems hard is easy, but what seems easy is hard. Let me repeat this. What seems hard is easy, but what seems easy is hard. And a perfect example of this is when Jesus says, no one is greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. All right, let's be honest. Laying down your life for someone is a pretty extreme act, especially if you take it literally. But let's remember that Congregationalists have long been known for being, shall we say, a bit unconventional. They're kind of like a bull in the theological china shop, rummaging around, breaking prohibitions and dogmatic beliefs. One of the prize pieces they delight in knocking over and smashing is literalism. They break it because they refuse to buy it. You see, there are different categories of laying down one's life. Yes, of course, there is the category of actually giving up one's physical existence for another, or at least being prepared to, without hesitation, if and when the situation demands. Think of public safety officers, our police and firefighters and medics, or the women and men of the military. And unfortunately, given the circumstances these days, teachers whose willingness should never have to be tested and proven. Then there's a category of those who do give up their physical existence for others, although it isn't something that they were necessarily bargaining for. It was never part of their everyday thinking, yet when called upon to do so, they didn't hesitate. We see examples of this on the news when they're commended for rising to the occasion. This isn't a resurrection reference, but it could be. Then there's a category that includes those who make sure that they save the lives of others when their own has ended. I'm thinking of organ donors and also those who donate their bodies to medical schools so that future doctors can learn how to save lives. Pat and I had a good friend who was both a Catholic priest and an anatomy professor, whose students learn fundamental medical skills through the dissection of bodies. At the end of the academic year, he always held very moving special service to commemorate those who had given up their bodies to help save the lives of others. And finally, we come to the largest, or perhaps the least recognized category, the one that most of us probably fall into or can fall into. But understand that we have to go back to the Greek again for a moment, and the word life. As with love, there are a number of Greek words for life. There's bios, which refers to the life of the physical body. Then there's Zoe, which refers to the divine life God uniquely possesses. And then there's Psyche, which refers to the psychological life of the human soul, the mind, the emotion, the heart, being, and will. Psyche is the word John uses here with tithemi, which means to lay down, set down, or set aside. South African minister and counselor Peter Cook wonders, would I be pushing too hard to suggest that a contemporary reading of Jesus' words would be, there is no greater unconditional love than when someone gets their ego out of the way of another. Or maybe there's no greater unconditional love than giving that wad of money that you were going to spend on a new set of golf clubs to the food pantry instead. Now, you have to understand, golf and the country club you play at may be a big part of your being, yet you lay it down for others to live. And you're even thinking about giving up your membership and using the dues money to help house the homeless. It's sacrifice Not of your physical life, perhaps, but of your way of life. And guess what? According to what John wrote, it counts. It counts. The key word in what I just said here is maybe. Maybe. Remember the paradox that I said before. What seems hard is easy, but what seems easy is hard. The golf sacrifice is easy compared to sacrificing your physical life. Yet it may be too hard for many. The same is true of other ways of giving up your life. Jesus spelled them out in the Sermon on the Mount. In truth, he keeps talking about them throughout the Gospels. So easy, and yet so hard. Have a fight with your spouse. They have more right on their side, but you won't yield because it's part of your nature, your psyche, and you won't give it up for them. Or will you? How great is your love? And are you willing to have it measured by your sacrifice? Only then will you truly understand what Jesus meant is, and forgive me, one last song, the power of love.